Hello and welcome to this unusual video in which I focus on grades 5 and 6 for your literature questions. I'll show you the 9 things that make a grade 5 essay, and look, you only need 50% in the exam in 2018 to be given a grade 5. Then I'll show you how those 9 things for grade 5 become 10 for grade 6. And look, you only needed 61% to get that grade in 2018. Then I'll teach you how to approach the extract question. And then I'll teach you part of an essay which is on the border between grade 5 and grade 6 and would have scored about 17 marks out of 30. Each paragraph we look at will have some commentary about what the skill is that the student's looking at. So this will be relevant to you whatever text you're studying. So it won't matter if you've never read Macbeth. This is the only bit of the text that we'll be looking at, so it'll be easy to pick up. But do bear in mind, everything I'm teaching you will fit every single text that you are studying for literature. Okay, well, to get the grade 5, you need to be explaining, but the examiners are forgiving. You might not explain all the way through. So some parts of your essay can explain very badly and you'd still get a grade 5. Secondly, you must make sure that you answer the full question, everything in the question, and the easiest way to do that is to make sure that you use every keyword in the question in your answer. And the other thing to do is always make sure you write about the ending of the text, because that will always give the examiner the impression you're writing about the full task. You have to make a range of points. Now, the examiners don't tell us how many points that is. I tell my students that they need to get at least 8 quotations into an essay, and you'll probably get a grade 5 with fewer than 8, but if you set 8 as your target, you will always be in with a very good chance of getting grades 5 or 6. At grades 5 and 6, you're probably writing in P paragraphs, so you make your point, that's the first part of P, and then you have E, the examples or the evidence. And the key thing here is to make sure they are relevant. I don't really know how to show you this other than to say sometimes students put in a quotation that doesn't prove their point, it proves a different point. So if that's you, that's a habit to cure. But for most of you, this is bread and butter. You make a point and then you use a quotation to back it up. There's nothing difficult there. You've been doing it for probably 5 or 6 years. And then obviously you have the final part of P where you explain how your quotations back up your point. So basic P paragraphs are going to get you into the grade 5. And obviously the better your explanation, the higher up the grade range you go. So I'll put these 3 in purple for you, and they're just P. Your points, your examples, your explanations. Right, well now we get into a bit more detail about how your P paragraphs are going to get more marks. And one is commenting on the range of methods which the writer uses. So the language for describing methods is going to be really crucial to you. They are not complicated. You need to be able to talk about simile, metaphor, alliteration and personification. Those are the big ones. And then other words such as symbolism. So if you can talk about the writer's ideas, how one thing symbolizes something else, you will always be in grade 5. So if you're doing Jekyll and Hyde, you can talk about how the creation of Hyde symbolizes the Victorian reader's unease with the challenge that science places towards Christian faith. You could talk about the way Lady Macbeth symbolizes the sexist treatment of women in the patriarchal society of the 1600s. If you're writing about Scrooge, you can talk about how he symbolizes the lack of a welfare state in Victorian society, and he symbolizes how Dickens would like us to change our ways if we're a Victorian reader and look after those around us. And of course that's the same symbolism that you have in an inspector calls. So you can see this word symbolism is always going to give you access to the commenting on the methods mark. Now the next step is to show how this affects the reader's thoughts and ideas. And the reader that you're talking about there is the reader at the time. So once you start bringing in a little bit of context about what the reader at the time, or the audience, if it's a Shakespeare play, the audience at the time would have thought based on what they've read or experienced, then you're automatically getting over 50% of the marks. Next is the need to use relevant subject terminology, and that's really what you would use when you're talking about the methods. So every time you describe a method, you are using the relevant subject terminology and you'll get the grade. And then finally, you need to have some relevant context. Well, I've already dealt with that when you were talking about how these methods affected the readers at the time. And because you're looking at the contemporary readers, the readers at the time, you are automatically using contextual factors. So you will automatically get the marks. Now, amazingly, to get grade 6, a whole grade above, you pretty much do exactly the same thing. The only changes are the bits in bold. So for grade 6, you've got to make sure that all your explanations are clear, and that's really just paying attention when you're writing your essay. The other change is that you must use relevant and appropriate terminology. So in grade 6, you can't afford to make any mistakes. You can't call something a simile when in fact it is a metaphor. If you want to describe something as an adverb, you've got to make sure that it is an adverb and not an adjective. So you've got to make sure that it's appropriate. You have to have here more than one bit of context. And so that's the easiest way to jump into the grade 6, is mention context on more than one occasion. And then we have this new idea, link this to the writer's perspectives and ideas, and the easiest way to make you do that is to keep using the writer's name in your essay. And if you keep writing about what the writer wants us to think, you will always be in grade 6 because you will always be writing about the writer's perspectives. Now, obviously, that writer existed at the time that the text was written, and that forces you to write about the context, which forces the examiner to give you at least a grade 6. So hopefully you're starting to see that analysing the context is your quickest way to get into the grade 6. That is the superpower of context. Right, well, let's see what it looks like in an essay. So this extract, which I'm not going to go through with you and bore you, is Lady Macbeth calling on evil spirits to come and make her evil so that she and Macbeth can kill the king, Duncan. And each paragraph I'm going to show you would give the student at least 17 marks out of 30. So the first thing I'm going to teach you is what effective references look like. Lady Macbeth needs to hide her emotion from others, and so that's the point, and wants to stop up the passage to remorse. That's the evidence. Now comes the explanation, and you can always tell the examiner an explanation is coming by using the phrase "this suggests." So this suggests she feels guilt and remorse. Remember to use a single word quotation from the longer one that you've got. That's a sign of a grade 6 skill, of having an effective reference. You're zooming in on one particular word. So she feels guilt and remorse and wants to block these emotions. Now, you need to start bringing in a little bit of context or author's point of view, and you do that by giving the author's name and saying something about what they wanted their readers to think. This would shock Shakespeare's contemporary audience. Contemporary means the audience at the time. Because she is summoning evil spirits, that one word quotation again, who they believed in, to help her convince her husband to kill. So I've written this reminder. Notice how the student zooms in on individual words to write a detailed explanation. This explanation is at least 2 sentences long, and so that's an easy way to make sure you're getting the explain marks. This will mean you're commenting on a range of methods, and you're going to say how it affects the reader's thoughts and ideas. So automatically pushing you into the grade 6. So the next paragraph is going to teach us how the student understands the writer's methods. She also tries to be powerful, asking the spirits to make her a man. Unsex me here reveals that she wants to be a man in order to become powerful. So we have here the point, then the evidence, and the explanation in the same sentence. That's starting to be sophisticated. In bold, we've got the writer's method. It reveals that she wants to be a man in order to become powerful. She's demanding and inspects the spirits to obey her. So that's a two-part explanation again, just as we had in the previous paragraph. Similarly, she wants Macbeth to kill Duncan as soon as Macbeth tells her about the witch's prophecies. She wants power immediately. Right, and here is my examiner's note. Although the student doesn't name the methods, using words such as reveals and similarly tells the examiner that she is thinking about how the writer is trying to influence our thought. So this was point number 7, show how this affects the reader's thoughts and ideas about a character or a theme, and it also starts to do number 10, link these ideas to the writer's perspectives. These to the writer's perspectives and ideas. Now to fully do that, this student would need to start writing about Shakespeare's view of the role of women in society, and the student would benefit from writing about the patriarchal society. But that would be to get into the top of grade 6 and into grade 7. So let's see how this student now deals with the writer's ideas in her next paragraph. She needs to become male, a different sex, because women lacked power in Jacobean times. So here we've got subject terminology to write about the context of the time. She needs a man's power to convince Macbeth to kill. So although this isn't a developed point about the context, because the student's using the right vocabulary to describe the context, they're automatically getting into that beginning of grade 6. So my examiner's point is, notice how useful context is. Do you remember I called it a superpower? In showing that you were thinking about the writer's ideas. The word Jacobean will always be relevant in any essay on Macbeth, and just as Elizabethan is relevant to any essay on Romeo and Juliet. So, if you're studying Romeo and Juliet, you are going to use the word Elizabethan in your essay, and if you're studying Macbeth, you will use the word Jacobean. And it's worth making a note now of what sorts of words you will use in your literature text, whatever it is. And there'll always be words around the context that will be the same, that you will need every single time you write about that text. Okay, the next skill was to link what you found out about the context to what the author is saying about the character. So let's go back to Lady Macbeth. Although contemporary women would also want to be more powerful, this would shock his Jacobean audience because they would never do something as extreme as summon spirits. So my examiner's comment, although this is a simple point, it doesn't consider why Shakespeare wants to shock his audience. The references to context show that the student is dealing with a range of points and using several contextual references. So if we go back to the 10 things we had to do for grade 6, I hope you can see how useful context is for you. The other thing that you needed to learn was to have more than one part for your explanation. And the final point was you can get up to grade 6 quite easily simply using P paragraphs. And 61% is not a massive score that you need to get into grade 6. And I hope this gives you the confidence to try out some exam answers using these skills, and then you'll soon be looking at the rest of my videos on grades 7, 8 and 9. If you would like more grade 5 and 6 videos, please post me a comment below or email me at sallesdominic@gmail.com. Thank you very much. See you soon on my channel.